Well, I think we're about ready to begin. My name is Bob Smith. I am one of the 9 founders of Imagic.
Oh yeah, I was just waiting.
There were a lot of us. I had come from Atari, and this. Go ahead.
My name is Willy Aguilar. I was one of the first artists at Imagic. I worked with Bob and Rob Pullup and Dennis Coble and the gang. My background was more traditional art at the time because computer art didn't exist. So I did illustration, cartooning, commercial art, anything that an artist can do to fit bills. And then I got a call from a friend to come and work with these guys doing packaging. And well, we can talk more about the details later, but then that started my video game career, and I worked 32 years in that. And most recently, I worked 21 years, till about 3 years ago, at Electronic Arts.
Okay. Along about 1980, when I first joined Atari, the weekly software meetings were amazing. They would come in every week and say, Space Invaders has done 500,000. Can you believe that? And we all go, wow. Next week they come back, Space Invaders has done 750,000 units. And it just, week after week after week. And due to the fact that they were making money hand over fist for everyone sold, they were making huge amounts of money. I did video pinball for Atari when I first arrived, and sold a couple million copies of that, and I was paid about $8,000, and they probably made $40 million for my cartridge anyway. So
Seems right.
I was ready to listen to the siren call when Dennis Coble approached me and said, Bill Grubb, who was a VP of sales at Atari, wants to get a company together with some Mattel people, and we'd like you to be one of the 2600 thing. So Dennis and Rob Fulp and I were the 2600 contingent, and we had 4 or 5 people from Mattel, both hardware and software, and Bill Grubb was our CEO. And I walked out of Atari in 1981. I declined the interview with the company president who wanted to see us all because this was a very big deal. You can imagine the kind of money that was on the table here. So they, after seeing Activision's success, they did not want to see another company. So that's where Imagic started. And we, 9 of us got together. I left Atari and we formed a small company and decided right off the bat that we had to have some art talent. Because up to that time, our 2600 games, we had basically done on graph paper. And not even, I guess we used colored pens too, so we had color as well. But it was very, very crude. And so just before I left Atari, I demanded they hire a pixel artist. I said, this is stupid having programmers do pixel art. And Ed told me that Coinoc had arrived at the same conclusion at least a year before and had people who were doing pixel art for the programmers rather than having the programmers do their crummy art.
A good decision.
It was an excellent decision. And so I left, and then when we started Imagic, the higher-ups still didn't get it. So Michael and Willie were kind of hired. We're going to do packaging. Of course, we were telling Dennis, who was he was the VP. I was just a programmer. We're going to take these guys for pixel art. We need pixel art because they can take advantage of artifacting, all the things that an NTSC television has that just can't be done any other way except a good eye. And we didn't have that. We had graph paper. So we hired Michael, and Michael brought Willie along, and they were the first 2 graphic artists at Imagic. And I'll let you.
Yeah, well, until this moment, I didn't realize how pre-planned that was. I knew they wanted us to work with them, but I thought that kind of evolved after we got there. So, learning something new every day. So, as I was saying, I started out as a traditional artist, mainly I started out like fine art, but then really moved over to graphics, and enjoyed that and starved doing that for a long time. And I met Michael Becker, who's, he's my mentor, and we worked together. We worked at a print shop doing basically junk mail. And we would do sketches for it if they needed sketches, but we would be printing and we learned a little bit about mass marketing at that time. And then we kind of went our own ways, and I had my own studio at that time, doing a lot of work in Silicon Valley. Born in San Francisco, moved to San Mateo, basically, San Mateo County. And that's right on the edge of Silicon Valley, and Hewlett Packard and all these other companies were coming up at that time. So this is like 1975 or so. And then we went off our ways. I had my own studio at that time, and Michael was doing something else, and he calls me up and he said, well, how about you come and work with me? We're starting up an art department for this video game company for home use. And he said it was Imagic. And I go, oh, gee, that's a thing? You know, oh, yeah, I guess. And he described the job. And he, at that time, it was going to be packaging. And I'll talk a little bit about the packaging we did do. It was just like a dream job, most definitely. And I was about to go into business with some other friend, buying typesetting equipment. It was something that was going to be obsolete in just a matter of years. And I would have put in like 20 grand in this. And so anyway, I decided, okay, I'm going to go and work with Michael because, you know, I trust his judgment. And we showed up there and we were going to do packaging initially. And we did. We did layouts for, you know, all, you know, Demon Attack and Atlantis and all those games. There was about 10 of us there with, you know, traditional designers. And we had, you know, we spent a lot of money on packaging. We would go on press runs with the big web presses and all these things. And then over time, we started palling up with Rob Bullock, who did Demon Attack, Bob and Dennis and all the other engineers were there. And they were asking, you know, so what would it look like? What's the best color for this dragon? What's the best color for this? You know, simple questions. And then they wanted to know what a sketch for a monster would be, or a castle, or whatever it was that were the games we were doing. And we would, you know, initially would just freehand draw them, and they go, yeah. Well, what you really need to do is maybe you can put it in this, you know, this grid paper and just color in the squares. And we thought, man,
They were horrified.
it was like, you're not kidding, seriously, okay. So we did that, and then of course, they had the harder job even of typing it in, you know, line by line, and all the stuff that, you know, the guys that I'd known that came from Atari, Mattel, and all those other companies had to do at the time. And we did that for a while, and actually for an example, on the packaging at that time, you couldn't do screen captures. There really wasn't a way to do screen capture. So either you kind of eyeball it, and then you get colored paper, you tack it down, and then you put it on the box. So that's one of the very first ways, we would capture is they would freeze the screen, and we'd maybe get like a piece of acetate on the TV, and with a grease pencil, not even like a flare pen, because they didn't even have them, you'd kind of line it up, and then you'd cut it out of colored paper, which was Pantone paper, because a specific color, you know, for reds and green, you know, whatever they were, and or sticky stuff like it's called Zipatone, and you were pressing it down. That's what screen capture was in 1982. And even that seemed kind of cool. And I'm actually, you know, if you look at some of those boxes, you can kind of tell that they don't really look like pixels. They're not, you know, you don't see the raster lines or anything like that you might kind of detect in later screenshots. That's kind of how we did it. So when we started doing that, and Bob and those guys wanted us to do graphics, we said, this is a lot of fun, but it's really difficult. So I said, oh, yeah, we understand that. So they went off, and Bob came back with a program, and I think it was late 82, beginning of 83, around that time. It was called, was it?
Late 81.
Okay, well, I got there in 82, so it was probably in the works. But anyway, it was called Draw. It was on 400 or 800.
Same deal.
Oh, okay, same deal. See, I'm an artist. I still don't know the difference. But anyway, so it was basically, you get a grid on the screen, and then you had a joystick, and as you moved it, the pixel on the screen, you would plop pixels down. And then they would stay, and if you held it, it would change the brightness. If you held it the other way, it would change the hue. And that was, I think, one of the very first tools that I know of. Yes, sir, in the middle there.
A question for Bob Smith. Isn't it, in fact, the reason this tool was invented was to save you the trouble of gloriously copying the device and not really to benefit the artist that much?
I got pretty good in hex. You know, I could look at a piece of graph paper and tell you what the value was in hex if I had 8 pixels there.
There was an artist that I worked with. He actually was colorblind. And he remembered the numbers because he couldn't quite tell. You know, the red-green thing was a little difficult for him. But so he knew that. And we learned that stuff at the time, so kind of made sense. And then Rob Fulop made a tool called Move, and that was basically a flip book. So you just change a few pixels and you could see it right away. And
We had 8x8 sprites, so it was a quick tool that would allow you to modify an 8x8.
And I remember we talked also about stacking sprites, which became common later.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, those were the very first tools that we used, and we were talking to people here earlier to see if that, I wasn't sure was those the very first tools, and I think the first tools were several years before, maybe 79, 80. So we were there, 81, 82. It was pretty much not too many people doing computer art for games at that time. I don't know how many there would be, but anyway, that's how we started.
There probably weren't more than a dozen in the world when we first started
Yeah,
out.
probably. So,
A pixel? What's a pixel?
yeah, I didn't really know. So, do you want me to continue, or?
Go ahead.
Good observation. I talked to David Crane about this. He was still doing graph paper stuff as related to pitfall, so you guys were one of the earliest.
Yes, I talked to Dave about that last night. I asked him, what were you using in Activision? He said, we didn't have a tool. We were still using graph paper.
Yeah, I think I still have some of that graph paper around.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did all my projects in quadrille notebooks. So I have all my 2600 work, albeit in, a very obscure form, but it's all there along with the graphics. Yeah.
Oh, just one second. I just want to let you guys know it's a 5-minute warning. Got 5 minutes left. Oh, it just started? Oh, I'm so sorry. Our schedule's wrong. You guys are good.
Gee, I thought she was saving us.
I knew it was mesmerizing, but what was your question?
It was just base adulation. I want to say Atlantis, until I saw some of the homebrew cartridges recently, Atlantis was the first game that made me think, how in the hell did they do that? It was so impressive.
Yeah, that was a really great game. And then
Yes, it was.
tweaking the palettes, so it was nighttime, and then with the searchlights.
Yeah, Michael and Willie did a lot of work on that game, actually, for Artifact.
Yeah. I think one of the things, if I can just explain for me, it was just so much fun because we got to do just about everything. At that time, we're kind of going back to now with smaller teams because I've been on the 3-person team and the 200-person team in my career. The 3-person team's a lot more fun, and actually kind of what's going on. But at that time, what was cool is we could kind of get involved a little bit with the game design. The engineers were the game designers at that time. They had the concepts. But we could kibitz with them. We would brainstorm how something could be a little different, or, we just come up with ideas to build off of their initial concept. That was a lot of fun. Then we were doing the manuals and everything, so we'd do the screen captures, kind of like the way I described. So you would be doing a lot of, from the tangible packaging stuff, to the creative stuff, to the pixel art. And one of the things that we really got into was doing for the Imagic games. Initially, we had an agency with Steve Jacobs. He has the famous Demon Attack poster where it's a silver rubber dinosaur with a ballistic missile shoved up its butt. And I just love that thing. It's so classic. I have a huge poster at home of it. But once we didn't use them anymore, we started doing our own packaging art. And so we would we'd get every model that you could find and put it in a box, and then just randomly build them, pull them out and glue them together to make spaceships and castles and whatever it is we were making. And then we would do photography. So one example we have is of Dragonfire. It's a picture of a dragon's head, shooting some fire out. And that actually was a sculpture that Michael and I worked on. It's a rabbit skull that we actually got from somewhere. I think it was
I don't know where this
Keith had it. He had it, and it was kind of cleaned up. So what we did was we just put on an armature and then glued this stuff called Fimo. It's this clay that if you bake it, it turns into a plastic. So we sculpted all these parts and just glued them on, and made the head. So it's just about this big. It's curved over, and then with layered photography, old school, exposure photography, we layered in rocks, smoke, and the flame coming out is the hairspray with the lighter, and then we had a piece of art there. So we got to do a lot of that. We must have done a dozen titles that way, just making stuff up, and that was fun. And you didn't have to worry about the 40-hour week. Well, we weren't married then, and we could just sleep there at night, and we did all that. But it was more out of love and fun than money, which We got a little bit later.
We still delivered every 6 months. There was no getting around that.
Yeah.
There were 2 CESs every year, and we had to make both of them.
Yeah.
Plus, there was a 3-month lead time for ROMs, so that was kind of problematical at times.
Yeah. And I remember, we had to also at that time port games to all the different platforms. Maybe you can talk about all the different platforms.
Well, we usually started with the PAL, which meant we lost most of our colors. Phase alternating line, and then we would do the CCAM, which was even worse. That was only in France and Russia. But the way that they had modified the 2600 to do CCAM gave us about 6 colors, and not too much luminescence either. I don't remember how many. The normal 2600 had 8 luminescent values, but I wonder if I think CCAM did too. Just had a really poor palette of colors. But we had to turn all those out.
And so we started out with Atari and television, and then we did we do Coleco as well? There?
Later in the game, when the big crash happened, our CEO was Bruce Davis at that point, Bill Grubb.
And that was because Atari had a bad quarter, something like that? At that time?
The bottom dropped out of the 2600 market. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the sad story, but there was a lot of second-rate software out there, and the price of a cartridge, the wholesale price dropped from like $30 to $5 or less. And we could hardly make them for $5, so it became and everybody who we had sold 2 years worth of cartridges to were saying, you got to give me some price protection here. I can't get more than, X number of dollars for them, but I paid you so it's such and such. So we all went under with that. And we were looking for other contracts to stay alive. So we did some work for Commodore. We did some work with Bantam Books. We did some Choose Your Own Adventures, and we translated a couple of novels. There was Damiano.
Damiano, yeah.
Was the big one, and we also did a IBM PC version of Sherlock Holmes, which was actually a wonderful project.
Yeah.
I think it finally went out on the PC Junior. This is about the time PC Junior was coming out.
That's right, and Touchdown Football. Don't forget Touchdown Football.
Yeah,
that inspired Trip to make.
That's true. That was a talking game, which were few and far between. They had been done before. Notably, Brad Stewart's Talking Baseball on the 2600.
Yeah, that was.
The television, very first.
I'm sorry.
B-17 bomber on
Oh.
the television was the very first talking home arcade game, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Because Atari's senior staff came writing to me saying, why can't we have one of these?
I just remember that the IBM the PC Junior. It was the Peanut, right? That was the code name for it?
Yes, we were an actual developer for the IBM Junior, and we had to have a closet and a certain type of lock put on the door so that the PC Junior could exist in our building. And whoever was working on it had to work in this. It wasn't even as good as a cubicle because there were no windows. That was also against the contract. You couldn't have any windows.
But at the time,
people
the
could
graphics
spy.
were pretty decent on that one.
They were okay. They were 160, but they had a bitmap, which was more than the 2600 had, and they had lots of color.
Yeah. Well, I like that. Yeah. Yeah, and then we also did that Star Wars for Parker Brothers, right?
Well, yeah. Then we also picked up a contract with Parker Brothers, and they said,
trying to survive.
Yeah. They said we have 5 months left on our Star Wars license. You've got to do this for us. We had 5 months, so I said, okay, I'll do a 2600 Star Wars for you, and I did. I have always wished that I had an extra 5 weeks or 6 to work on it to finally polish the last kernels. It was a credible project, but it could have been better. But that was when we were just about near the auction time. We kept reorganizing. Everybody had left but me. I think I was the only founder left. Everybody else had gone off to greener pastures. Bill was long gone. And Rob and Dennis had split to do a company of their own. They had made out very well with royalties.
Sterling Silver, right?
No, Sterling was later.
It was later.
That was after Sente. That was after our coin-op experiences. But
Yeah, we wound up working at Sente together years later.
No, this was before Rob did PF Magic.
Hmm.
This was what,
Oh, they did another venture?
this was earlier. This was circa late 80s.
What was that called?
Probably.
You remember?
No, I don't. I just know that they had a contract for doing online things, and I wrote them a whole system to compact cards. And I don't know how to explain cards to you.
Give it a shot.
Give
These
it-
guys might know.
Probably.
You explain it to them.
They were 8 by. The best way to send things over a very slow system, like 1200 baud or 300 baud even, which is extremely slow for all you people who are really spoiled by broadband. So we decided that what we would do is we would ship them a series of 8 by 8 cards, and you would make up all your screens by composing them of all these cards. And I wrote the software that would actually take one of these screens, it would actually take 100 of these screens and animate them, going by how the cards had changed over each frame of animation. So it was a cheap way of doing heavy-duty animation on card-based machines online. And that was the whole thought behind it. Yeah.
Good question. Card is a big company with a lot of people behind it. You've had such flashy packaging, good game titles, good quality games. How many people were employed by you guys? What was your peak?
At our peak, we were probably at our peak probably about the end of '82. We had a very good first show in January of '82. And then for the next couple of shows, it was gangbusters, and we were hiring as fast as we could. We hired quite a number of people. At least, in engineering. I really wasn't on the production end, although I know the production end, a lot of that was subcontracted out.
And we had marketing departments and
Yes,
sales
yes.
forces.
Oh, yeah. So we filled, a large building. We started off in
You think it was
tiny
more than
offices.
500?
Oh, yeah. We started out in tiny offices in Saratoga, and we finally had to move to Los Gatos just so we could get the floor.
Lark Avenue, if you know where that is. Yeah. Those buildings are still there, I believe. Yeah, I remember when they had the meeting about the stock not doing well. People were, stockholders were coming in, and I had to guide them to it's down the hall. I gotta go. It was it was tough, that was the first experience I had in anything like that, because anything that I'd been doing before was standalone businesses that didn't have any kind of investments or, this is early on when all, with all the venture capital and stock options and all that stuff was all, was new to me. I mean, I think these guys have already seen a little bit from their experiences at Atari and other places maybe, but that was kind of rough, we had a lot of people invested and it just didn't work out,
Well, we were the golden boys for the first year and a half as far as the investors were concerned, but after that, I was at the board of directors meetings, and that was ugly. We owed a lot of money to a lot of people.
Yeah, but that story's been played out many, many times, so we kind of understand now that kind of cycle. But
I was going to say, you guys also were going to go public, and that's when Atari dropped the down, and you guys pulled the idea.
Yeah, we were all set for our IPO, and we were in the quiet period. And we had, gotten all our stock grants and so on, and Atari decided that they would announce their earnings early because they were awful, and they did it mainly to get us because they didn't want our public offering to go. But if our public offering had gone, we probably would have been sued right and left as soon as the market dropped out. We probably would have been accused of all kinds of things. So it was probably just as well that we did go public.
So, like I was saying before, this was the beginning of my career, so didn't really make that much money. I made it enough to kind of survive. But when I wound up working at Imagic, it was just more lucrative as we were talking. And the one thing I do want to mention is how generous the people I've worked with throughout this industry have been to each other and to me in particular. I mean, that's the experience I have. These guys were generous with their time, with helping us. I always felt it was very collaborative. It was so much fun. The typical brainstorming tenets are there, which is there's no bad ideas. Really encompassing everybody's creativity. And also financially, that was the first time I ever got a bonus. And I didn't even expect to get anything. And I don't remember the actual situation, but it was one quarter where we were kind of flush, and they said, well, here's some extra checks for everybody. So I got a very nice check, and my friend Michael Becker, he was basically my boss. He was like the art director, I guess, at that time. And he had worked his tail off. And so, we were, I remember we were like milling around. It was kind of rainy day session, and not much work was getting done that day. And I said, oh, wow, this check I got is really good. I didn't expect it. And I go, did you get it? He goes, no, I haven't got anything yet. And I go, oh, wow, that's kind of weird. So they call him into we all go into a room. I think we were having, some beverages or whatever and taking a break from working. And they present him with a briefcase. And it's a really nice briefcase. That's when people had, the hard cases that you would bring to work. And they said, well, here's a gift. And we thought, oh, it's a nice briefcase, but that's not much of a bonus. Opened it up, it was $5,000 in ones. And we thought it was hilarious, of course. And so I went with him to the bank, I think it was Wells Fargo. And he had to turn it in, and they said, well, we'll let you know in a couple of days how much is actually in here. And then we could deposit it into your account. They had to take out the stacks of ones. And it wound up to be about $5,000.
It should have been exactly 5,000.
Yeah, we don't know. I'm assuming that's what it was, but it's kind of funny. And that was great. I remember even the admins got a check, and you guys were like that. And it was really nice to see. Later everything,
Well, they were part of the creative process, let's face it.
I know, but that doesn't always get acknowledged. So I think on a human level, that was nice to see it in those terms.
So a quick one, here's this new company being formed by 9 founders. How long were you operating with the hope that, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and what was that first sign of success?
That's an interesting one, because when we first started out, we were sued by Atari. Our first day in business, we were in court, sued by Atari. So we were kind of worried about that, and we decided that, and to do this legally, we had to have somebody who actually peeled a TIA chip and reverse engineered the 2600 for us. And we had to wait for him to finish and get his stuff published, because that was our legal road to doing this. And of course, the lawsuits were all thrown out. But we all sat together and said, okay, we have about 4 months to get this together now, because we're going to have to wait for financing, and we're going to have to wait for this and that and the other. So we spent the time writing our tools, getting our development systems. We had, at the time, probably the most advanced development systems. We used in-circuit emulators, and everybody else finally went that way, but we were among the first to adopt in-circuit emulators, which was vastly superior to the brown box that we used at Atari.
Excuse me?
Oh, hell, here's the ex-Atari guy.
Yeah.
Yes, Rob?
Are we forgetting the logic analyzers, myself?
The best gift to the industry is an HP 1611A. There's no question about it.
I say that to my wife every morning.
That was the tool for the 2600.
You programmers in this room, how much would you give for the ability to break on the error and see the previous 64,000 instructions?
Yeah, it's just winding your way through the 64,000 instructions.
Remember, guys, it's only like 4K or 2K in the 2600 card. There's only a couple thousand.
Yeah, but a loop would be on the bus. Go ahead.
Let's take this to a spiteful place. When you wrote your tools, were you writing them in assembly? Or
Oh, yeah. We had no high-level languages. It was all assembly. So Rob wrote something to animate sprites, and I wrote something to animate backgrounds, even though the 2600 didn't have a background. And then later on, I wrote a tool that talked from the 800 to a 2600 using the 2600 sound channel, so you could compose on the 800 and then ship it over to the 2600 for play. But those were basically our development tools, in addition to the in-circuit emulator, which had all the debuggers and so on that we needed.
I'm sorry, back on my question. What was the first sign of success?
The first sign of success. So we spent the first 6 months just getting our stuff together and brainstorming games. And our first show was in January of 1982. This was the winter CES in Las Vegas. And So it was the first one. We hired a company to do our booth for us, and we had decided that we were going to use this Mylar packaging. Michael and Willie had a lot to do with that. So the packaging was very snappy and really popped out.
A little gaudy.
Right, and thy name is video game. And the booth matched the packaging. So the booth was quite gaudy as well. And we went to the first show, and we had our games up on booths, and here come the Activision boys, who were the four excellent programmers who had left before. Yeah, that's right. They were the Fantastic Four, and they came up and they looked at my game, and looked at all of our games, and we decided, and they approved. That's the moment. That is the moment.
Do you know who was in that group?
Well, Dave and Al and Bob and Larry. They thought we had done a credible job, and that our work was decent, and it was. It was very high quality. Our quality standards were very high. We used to rag on it. We all worked in the same lab, and we would rag mercilessly on someone who had a glitch or something we didn't like, and I hate that color.
What were the games in question here then?
The games that we did on first, Rob did Demon Attack, and I did Star Voyager, and Dennis, I think, did Trick Shot first, didn't he?
I thought Trick Shot was a little later. I don't remember what was his first game. Could it have been?
It wasn't Atlantis.
Oh, Trick Shot. Yeah.
Atlantis was his second game.
I was thinking Midway.
Oh, yeah.
Midway was one of his last ones.
Right. So when people that we respected saw our games and said that they were decent games, I knew we were okay. Business-wise, who knows? I'm just an engineer. But I felt like a success. And then a couple of years later, I got a mention in IEEE Spectrum for one of the kernels I had written for Dragonfire, which was very cool, because I'm not a degreed engineer. So that was like beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah, obviously for me, working with these guys doing that stuff was my highlight. Because I didn't understand the business at all. I mean, I didn't know, I was basically doing piecework before then. I did some kind of illustration and I got paid $50 or whatever it was. So this was a totally new environment. And really the thing that I think I've been fortunate is that I got involved in doing, video game art. Pixel art is what we called it then, a pixel pusher, and it turned into computer graphics over a period of years. And it seemed like I, was just kind of a slow-moving train, but inexorably moving forward, and I was just kind of hanging on to the back of it. Because every year something changed with the machines, where the quality was, was demanded to be better. The machines were more powerful, you could do more, and then the tools started to come in to be able to do that. And so you went from, the types of games we've been talking about here early on, and it just kept on going, even till my retirement, which I was doing some VR work then. It's just always been that way, and I think I've been very, very fortunate to come up in this time. You look at it back now, and maybe the graphics don't seem, of course they're rudimentary, but the games are superior. They were, games that could stand up on their own. And even though I was on the art side, I always felt that, you can make pretty stuff, but if there's no reason to look at those things or use them, that's why I always have respect for the other parts. I look at game development as three parts, the engineering, the game design, and the graphics. They have to work in a reasonable balance. Otherwise, that three-legged stool will not stay up. And it's proven out year after year after year, because, you have a great game, as you know, or movies or anything, look great, but the gameplay is terrible, or you have the gameplay, but you can't execute on it and because of engineering, and on. That's always been something that I believe in, and I think it's true to today, even though it's more complicated. Yes?
Can you guys speak more about the relationship with the Activision? Did you guys feel that they were like guys who were competing against, the guys you wanted to beat, or they were like the guys down the street that you wanted to hang out with, or you were upset they didn't invite you to join Activision before so Atari? What was your relationship there?
I did not know any of them. I had just arrived from New Mexico into Silicon Valley and convinced Dennis Cole to hire me into Atari because I had written a game that went out on the Trash 80. So I didn't know them at all. My first exposure to them was my first show with Atari, my first CES with Atari when I did video pinball for them, and watched them look at my game one by one and say, okay, you're a member of the club. So there was a lot of respect because there was, I knew a lot of their code. I had seen a lot of their code that was still at Atari because they didn't take code with them. And respect, and I actually later worked for Al Miller, one of the four, at Accolade. He and Bob Whitehead formed Accolade afterwards. So I went to work for Al. I still have a lot of respect for all four of them. I know Dave and Al the best. I know Larry slightly and Bob hardly at all. But,
is there anything you say that you got that Imagic did better or different or not as good as it? I mean, how did you feel about it?
well, it sounds like we had our art act together. So we did, that was different. That's it.
Or anything you were proud of that you guys were doing that you felt that they...
Well, I thought, Demon Attack won Game of the Year in our first round of products. So
It sold a lot.
And that was our best seller, I think. So we did okay sales-wise. We didn't have the marketing and the number of salespeople that Atari and distribution that Atari had, and Activision too. So we didn't have nearly the sales, but we did okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I seem to remember like a couple of Magic games where when the game came to an end, a little shuttle kept taking off. I was wondering if there was like a story behind that.
That sounds like Cosmic Arc.
I think it was also Atlantis.
There we go. Yes, I remember Atlantis. I'm sorry Dennis isn't here. He was supposed to be here, but he said, I'm going to Maui instead. I can't blame him given the rain. But yes, I do vaguely recall that. And Dennis did that, and there was a reason. I think it was kind of, we're going to the next city, and that's why it took off at the end of each wave.
Thank you.
Sure, Steve?
Question for Willy, just given your work on the packaging and maybe concept art for Demon Attack, I fondly remember that sort of mentor. Did you have anything to do with the Voltar ad campaign that came out later?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Senator, I did have nothing to do with that. Actually, I think Voltar is what the space station was on the Tandy in Demon Attack.
Was it? I don't remember.
I might be making that up, but I think, yeah, no, I did not. Yeah, no, that was done by the ad agency, the kind of the demon looking character. Yeah, no, that was a surprise to me too.
Yes, I still have some half-inch videotape of those early ads.
Yeah, remember we had that, the video game selector box thing, what was that called?
There's one in the museum.
You remember that?
There's one in the museum, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was called.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called, but we were trying to diversify our product line, so it was this big box where you could put all your cartridges in, and then you had some kind of analog dial or something, and then you could switch it to the different game, and it would already be set up on your TV and your system. I don't remember that doing it very well.
I just remember it as a sales tool.
Yeah, yeah.
I could care less, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. I unfortunately had to help the marketing department with things like that. I mean, they were great people. I'm not trying to disparage them. They were just trying to do their job. But sometimes, we were talking about this earlier when it was getting near the end there, and we were trying to come up, but Bob had just done a game called Moonsweeper. And we were going to show it at the show, and we had all the marketing materials. And the last thing I remember helping some of the people in the marketing department spray foam rocks so that we could hand them out at the show. That was gonna, kind of save the company, kind of. I was thinking, I don't know if that's gonna do it. But you do what you have to do at the time. And it did, yeah, you're right. Spraying foam rocks, okay.
Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned that Imagic's first day in production was also their first day in court for copyright infringement.
Well, I think it was the lawsuit was more like mopery and dopery. It was thrown out of court. Go ahead.
Did you have any other corporations other than Atari try to attack you that way?
No.
Because you're small.
No. Well, of course, the Motorola thing, right? Motorola decided that they had patented bitmaps, so anybody who was using a bitmap needed to pay Motorola right away. But that was industry-wide. But Atari were really the only ones who gave us grief, and they didn't like us leaving Atari.
How was the relationship with Mattel? Because I think you were the first ones to go third party for that system.
I actually don't know. We were fairly separate because, like I say, we were working for deadlines. Every 6 months we needed to ship, so we would spend long hours. We socialized, but not that much. And the Mattel people had a huge task in front of them because they had to build a development system. We just used in-circuit emulators, right? Just plugged those right onto the 6507. Whereas this was a 10-bit GI chip. This was very interesting hardware, to say the least. So they had to come up with a development system and development software. So they got a VAX and started coding. It was probably a year and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say that we did games for both, and if we ported them over, we would have to redo the graphics, which, you know, even then was not that difficult because we had figured it out, but there was a whole new system in order to import that, and it was later. I remember everybody was working feverishly away, and there were a few titles that were in television only, like I think Microsurgeon was the first one, which was like kind of like Fantastic Voyage. And that was, at that time, that was a really pretty snazzy game because you got to, you know, you had to scroll up and down the human body, and there were a lot of colors, and the animations were kind of cool.
Yeah, ooh, bitmaps.
Yeah. But yeah, that was later. I remember that. So, but it was good for us because, like I was saying before, how, you know, it was a progression. By then, doing pixel art, which is only a year or so, we kind of got the hang of it. We got kind of the language of being able to figure that out, to interpret, you know, what their vision and do it visually with kind of the standard art tools that we had, which was paper and, you know, paper and pen and stuff, and then graph paper and all that. So by the time we got to the Intellivision, we had to learn a new tool, which I didn't realize that would be my career for 30 years, learning a new tool and the new version of that tool.
Well, yeah, I learned new languages. You know, that's
just the way it was.
It works.
Yeah, which I liked to some degree.
Oh, we got about 5 minutes left. Are there more questions? Yeah. Sure.
How long were you flying cardboard, as they say, before you bring like Willy into the graphics?
I'd like to get my kernels running, and it was pointless. You know, it was kind of the kernel was kind of a proof of concept. I have a really good idea for a display. Can I do it? And I would fly FFs, right, which is just rectangles on the screen instead of graphics. And then as soon as I had proved the concept, then I said, okay, give me a static, and then later on, give me, you know.
Just for clarification, Bob, I remember it as flying plywood,
Yeah.
not cardboard.
Different company.
Yeah, I think we were flying, well, you know, we had 2 and 3 ply.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How close was Wingboard being along the way before it was released to NTSC for 2600? Was that a plan? Because I know it came out in PAL and it came out for the ColecoVision.
Yeah.
But it never made its way, you know, US version of Wingboard.
Oh,
Release
that's
that.
prety good
Oh, okay.
that you knew that.
Yeah, that was my goal.
I worked on Wingmore as well. I think on, trying to remember, I thought it was Coleco.
I cannot remember his last name. The guy who wrote it.
Oh,
Michael.
I thought you were talking about Becker.
No.
Oh God, that's a long
I can
time
picture
ago.
him. I just can't come up with his name. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the last games, right?
It was one of the last games, yes.
It was very cool. I liked it.
Probably just got cut off then.
Yeah.
It was kind of a joust.
PAL version, we're done.
Yeah, there were games that I had to stop because of Magic's money. I was in the middle of working on a 400, 800 dungeon. And
It was kind of like Doom.
word came down, we haven't got the money to finish this, so I mean, you may as well stop, which I did.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, so speaking about finishing games, I know you had mentioned in years past you had been working on one. I was just wondering how far along it is, Bob?
Oh, it's shipped. I gave it to the National Video Game Museum. So that's the only place it'll be sold. It won't be sold online as far as I know. And, it is a dungeon. Yes, indeed, it is a dungeon. It's a 2600 dungeon that flickers like mad.
It's the one you were working on back in the day?
No, Dennis was doing the 2600 version, and I was doing the 800 version.
Oh.
And we both stopped at the same time, and I thought about it for years, and I finally decided I want to do a 2600 game. So I did. I didn't use any of the new hardware of the, the fancy, add RAM and add another processor in there. I didn't do any of that. I did go to 16K because I wanted the space.
No, fess up.
Yeah, well, bank switch was a proven technology. So, but at any rate, John Hardy at the National Video Game Museum is the owner of that game right now.
Oh, okay. It's-
So, and he says he'll publish it in the next year or two. So,
Oh, it's not?
no, it is not. It is not anywhere out there at all.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're done.
One
Well,
thing I mentioned,
well, we are time.
You could be telling everyone they can see you in the golden age if they go on YouTube and look at that old Enterprise video. That the magic we can find it on, it was called.
Really?
All in the game, and it's right there.
That rings a bell.
It's, there's a whole half-hour documentary shot in Magic in 1986. Cool.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
We're gonna go up to the